Felix, headset. Felix, headset.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danon, will deliver a brief statement about the recent developments in the region. He will take your questions afterwards. If you are called to ask a question, please remember to state your name and news outlet. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Since the launch of Operation Riding Lion, Israel has worked with clarity and purpose to remove a double existential threat, both the nuclear threat and the threat of the Iranian regime's ballistic missile capabilities. The IDF achieved complete air superiority over Iran, struck a severe blow to Iran's military leadership, and dismantled dozens of the regime's key strategic sites. Our forces acted with precision, resolve, and restraint. These threats no longer hang over the people of Israel as they did just a few days ago. In full coordination with President Trump, Israel has agreed to a ceasefire. We thank the United States for its support and for its critical role in helping remove the Iranian nuclear threat. Last night, 4 innocent civilians were murdered in Beersheba by Iran. Their tragic deaths are a reminder of the evil we faced. My friends, Israel is a peaceful nation. We pray for peace 3 times a day, but let no one mistake our desire for peace as a weakness. Any violation of the ceasefire and any threat against our people will be met with a forceful response. We have demonstrated that we can and will act to defend our people against any threat. We will do so with overwhelming strength and moral clarity. We have seen the seismic impact of the Abraham Accords. Today, I have no doubt that the leadership Israel displayed in recent days will enable more countries to join the path of normalization. Israel has proven that it can confront the most serious threats in the region and that we will never hesitate to defend our future. Thank you.
Ambassador, 2 questions shared with China Central Television. First, a U.S. congressman today sent a letter to nominate President Trump Nobel Peace Prize. What is your opinion? And secondly, many leaders talking about another ceasefire, which is Gaza ceasefire. Do you think it's a good time now to talk about Gaza ceasefire? Thank you.
Well, first, I think that President Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I think we should thank him for his leadership, for the brave decision he took, and to recognize the effort of the United States. Regarding your second question, yes, we hope to see a ceasefire also in Gaza. There is a proposal on the table that Ambassador Witkoff put forward, and we hope to renew the negotiations on that proposal.
Mr. Ambassador, can you tell us what the follow-up to this ceasefire announcement is going to be? Are there going to be diplomatic talks between Iran and Israel? Is this something that Israel would like to see? The Iranians have already indicated that they want to see talks.
Well, Edith, after every military operation or conflict, you have the diplomatic efforts. And I'm sure it will be the case also in this scenario. Because diplomacy failed, we had to act, and the US had to act. So I think, yes, we will have to speak and negotiate and make sure that we will not repeat and get to a situation where we were 12 days ago when we had a major threat in the Middle East.
How do you see those starting?
Well, it's too early. It's too early. You know, we just announced about the ceasefire today, but I believe it will happen soon.
Ambassador, you're talking about.
Would you support the Security Council having a resolution on the ceasefire between Israel and Iran? And would you maybe discuss it with your Iranian counterpart in person?
So I don't have any communication with the Iranian representative at the UN. I don't think that we need a Security Council resolution. The parties accepted the proposal of President Trump, but maybe in the future there will be a place for involvement of a UN organization.
Ambassador,
Yeah.
Ambassador, Iran said that it moved most of its highly enriched uranium before the strike and before now. Does Israel know where it is? And President Trump said the program has been obliterated. Does Israel agree with that? What's your assessment?
Well, I think it's still early to assess all the strikes. We know we were able to push back the program. We were able to remove the imminent threat that we had. And Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke about the uranium you mentioned, that we think we have a knowledge about it, but we cannot go into details about it.
Ambassador, you're talking about the expansion of Abraham Accord. Are you referring to certain countries, like in particular in the region? What countries you're talking about?
Well, I'm very optimistic. I think we should not name names. We should talk with our neighbors. I think they saw our capabilities, our intentions, and I think now it's time to build bridges and partnerships in the region. You know, we are very proud of the relationship we have with the Abrahamic countries like the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, for sure the treaties we have with Egypt and Jordan, and I believe we will see more countries joining this path of peace.
Ambassador, the Iranian leadership, including the President Masoud Pezeshkian, are announcing this conflict as a victory for the Islamic Republic of Iran. What does Israel and you personally think about they are announcing this as a victory for the Islamic Republic?
Well, I think the last thing that they can do is call it a victory. You know, maybe they want to show face to their people, but I think the Iranian people are smarter. They realize that, you know, what the regime did over the years was bad for Iran, and that both Israel and the US had and have the capabilities to push back the evil regime when they do those kind of things. Thank you very much.
UNIFIL, what's your position on the renewal of UNIFIL? It will be discussed next month.
So we still have time for that. It will be discussed only in the beginning of August, I believe. So we will speak with the commanders and with the partners about it. Thank you.
The 9,944th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is non-proliferation. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Germany, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Israel to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, and His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2025/335, a letter dated 28th of May 2025 from the President of the Security Council, acting in the absence of a facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231, addressed to the President of the Security Council, and document S/2025-397, the 19th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. At this meeting, the Council will hear briefings by Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, and Ambassador Samuel Zbogar, Permanent Representative of Slovenia, in his capacity as Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Madam President, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Council on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and the implementation of Resolution 2231. As the Secretary General noted in his latest report, with less than 4 months left until the termination of its provisions, the objectives of Resolution 2231 and those of the JCPOA have yet to be fully realized. This is regrettable. The JCPOA was adopted in 2015 to ensure that the Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear program would be exclusively peaceful. It included sanctions relief, nuclear program restrictions, and monitoring and verification. The JCPOA has faced many challenges since its inception, including the withdrawal of the United States from the agreement in 2018 and Iran's withdrawal from some of its commitments as outlined in the plan. Still, over the last few months, JCPOA participants increased their efforts to identify a way forward for full implementation of the plan. In addition, Iran and the United States engaged in 5 rounds of bilateral talks facilitated by Oman. Regrettably, neither of these initiatives produced a way forward to ensuring the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. The military escalation between Israel and Iran since 13 June and United States airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities on 21 June complicated prospects for achieving full implementation of Resolution 2231. Iran strikes yesterday on a base in Qatar, an action which the Secretary General condemned, further exacerbated insecurity in an already tense region. Madam President, earlier today, the Secretary General welcomed the announcement by the United States, in coordination with Qatar, of a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran, and urged them to respect it fully. This is a significant achievement that potentially pulls Iran, Israel, and the region back from the brink. the people of Iran and Israel have already suffered too much. According to the Iranian Ministry of Health, since the start of the conflict, at least 606 people have been killed, with 107 killed in the past 24 hours and 5,332 injured. According to Israeli authorities, 28 people were killed and 1,472 were injured during the conflict. Madam President, in its quarterly report of 31 May 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency observed that the significantly increased production and accumulation of highly enriched uranium by the Islamic Republic of Iran was of serious concern. The IAEA reiterated that its verification and monitoring activities related to the JCPOA have been seriously affected by the cessation of implementation by Iran of its nuclear-related commitments under the plan. The agency also again noted that it had lost its continuity of knowledge on many aspects of Iran's nuclear program, as it had not been able to perform verification and monitoring activities in the Islamic Republic of Iran for more than 4 years. In addition, the IAEA noted it was unable to verify the total stockpile of enriched uranium in the country and had not done so since February 2021. During the reporting period, the Secretary General received several communications from JCPOA participants. On 17 March, the permanent representatives of China, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Russian Federation shared a joint statement adopted at their meeting of 14 March in Beijing, in which they stressed the importance of Resolution 2231, including its timeframes. In a separate letter received the same day, the permanent representative of China shared a proposal for the settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue, highlighting the JCPOA as the basis for a new consensus and cooperation through dialogue and a step-by-step and reciprocal approach. In letters received on 9, 11, and 12 June, the permanent representatives of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Russian Federation shared their different views regarding the causes of the impasse in the implementation of Resolution 2231. Despite their diverging outlooks, all 5 member states reiterated the importance of negotiations and reaffirmed their commitment to finding a diplomatic solution. Madam President, I'll now turn to the restrictive measures set out in Annex B to Resolution 2231. The only measures that remain in effect pertain to nuclear activities and transfers. Those measures will remain in place until 18 October 2025, unless decided otherwise by the Council. The Secretariat received no allegations of violations of these provisions during the reporting period. Moreover, no new proposals have been submitted in the procurement channel in the last 6 months of the reporting cycle. The Security Council, however, received 8 notifications regarding the nuclear-related restrictive measures for certain activities consistent with the JCPOA. Madam President, at the heart of this conflict is the nature of Iran's nuclear program. Following the deadly clashes of the past 12 days, the ceasefire agreement is an opportunity to avoid a catastrophic escalation and achieve a peaceful resolution of the Iran nuclear issue. Diplomacy, dialogue, and verification remain the best option to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program and to bring about concrete economic benefits to the people of Iran. As the Secretary General said earlier today, the United Nations stands ready to support all efforts that advance peace, dialogue, and stability in the region. And finally, Madam President, the Secretariat will continue to support the implementation of 2231 until the termination date of 18 October. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank His Excellency Samuel Zbogar of Slovenia for his leadership as Security Council facilitator for the implementation of the resolution. I also thank the coordinator of the Procurement Working Group of the Joint Commissioner for our continued cooperation. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis.
Thank you, Madam President. It is an honor to have the opportunity to address the Council on behalf of the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Ms. Kaja Kallas, in her capacity as coordinator of the Joint Commission of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I would also like to thank Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the Secretariat for their work related to the implementation of Resolution 2231, as well as Slovenia as the facilitator of Resolution 2231. We take note of the 19th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. This session takes place under most serious circumstances, with a dangerous cycle of escalation following military action against nuclear-related sites in Iran. In view of this, the UN Secretary General on Sunday stated in this Council that there is a growing risk that this conflict could rapidly get out of control, with catastrophic consequences for civilians, the region, and the world. We welcome the announced ceasefire and urge all sides to effectively implement it. The High Representative is engaged and has been following very closely the situation in the Middle East and reiterates the EU's strong commitment to regional security, including the security of the State of Israel, and the call on all sides to abide by international law, show restraint, and refrain from taking further steps which could lead to serious consequences, such as potential radioactive release. Madam President, ensuring that Iran does not acquire or develop a nuclear weapon remains a key security priority for the European Union. IAEA DG Grossi at the end of May reported on the further expansion of enrichment capacity and operation, as well as on a sharp increase in the production of 60% enriched uranium, close to military levels. Iran was already far away from its JCPOA commitments. Iran chose to continue the dramatic expansion of its program at an alarming pace, going beyond what is plausibly necessary for a civilian program. In the special session of the IAEA Board of Governors on 23 June, DG Grossi raised the need to account for the stockpile of highly enriched uranium following the events of the last days. Moreover, it has been more than 4 years that the agency has not been able to perform all JCPOA-related monitoring activities and has therefore lost the continuity of knowledge as regards several key components of the nuclear program of Iran. We continue to recognize that Iran has faced and continues facing very serious negative economic consequences following the U.S.'s withdrawal from the JCPOA and the reimposition of previously lifted U.S. unilateral sanctions. The U.S. has also gradually imposed additional sanctions linked to the nuclear program. Many efforts have been made to preserve the JCPOA, notably when the High Representative put forward a compromise text, laying down the necessary steps needed for the U.S. to return to the JCPOA and for Iran to resume the full implementation of its commitments. These efforts did not lead to the expected results, and we are now in the current situation. Madam President, in 4 months from now, the Security Council will no longer be seized of the Iran nuclear issue under Resolution 2231, and we urgently need to come back to a diplomatic solution. Let us be clear in what will be the last session in this format under UNSCR 2231. A lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue can only be through a negotiated deal, not military action. A fully functioning nuclear deal will be conducive to the stabilization of the whole region. Last Friday, as part of an intense diplomatic engagement, EU High Representative Kallas, together with the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, met with the Iranian foreign minister in Geneva. They reiterated the long-standing concerns about Iran's expansion of its nuclear program, and they discussed avenues towards a negotiated solution. The matter can only be addressed in a sustainable manner with the adequate involvement of the international community. Moreover, the IAEA is and should remain the sole impartial and independent international organization to monitor and verify the implementation of Iran's nuclear non-proliferation commitments. Diplomacy, Madam President, must prevail. The European Union High Representative will continue to contribute to all diplomatic efforts to reduce tensions and to find a lasting solution to the Iran nuclear issue. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Lambrinidis for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ambassador Samuels-Vogar.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm speaking in my capacities as the Security Council's appointed facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. The 90th Facilitator's report was agreed by Council members on 20th June 2025. I would like to thank all Council members for their cooperation and constructive engagement in this process, and for their willingness to seek consensus and compromise in preparing the report. As this is Slovenia's first report as facilitator since taking up the role on 29 May 2025, I'm especially grateful for everyone's kind support and the extra flexibility shown due to resulting time constraints. The report provides a factual account of the activities related to the 2231 format of the Security Council, which took place from 14 December 2024 to 23 June 2025. It includes several subsections, namely the summaries of activities, monitoring the implementation of the resolution, relevant communications, key aspects of the workings of the procurement channel, as well as transparency, outreach, and guidance. You may refer to the report for details, but I wish to mention the following key aspects. First, one meeting of the Council in the 2231 format was held during this reporting period. The meeting was held on 23 June 2025, and representatives of the Security Council discussed the findings and recommendations contained in the 90th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231 prior to its public release. Under-Secretary General Di Carlo has already referred to this report in her statement. Second, during the reporting period, a total of 19 notes were circulated within the 2231 format. In addition, a total of 10 official communications were sent to Member States and the coordinator of the Procurement Working Group of the Joint Commission, and a total of 10 communications from Member States and the coordinator were received. Quarterly reports issued by the International Atomic Energy Agency in February and May 2025. The key aspects of these agency reports are duly reflected in my report. The IAEA plays an important role in the verification and monitoring of nuclear activities in the Islamic Republic of Iran, as requested under Resolution 2231. The IAEA's work provides confidence for the international community that the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic of Iran is for exclusively peaceful purposes, in accordance with the modalities set out in the JCPOA. The reports of Director General play a significant role in this regard. Thirdly, I report that no new proposals were submitted to the Security Council through the procurement channel during the reporting period. The procurement channel represents a key transparency and confidence-building mechanism under the JCPOA. It remains operational, and the Procurement Working Group stands ready to review proposals. Madam President, we are approaching the termination day of Resolution 2231 in October, and this may be the last report in this framework. I reiterate that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, as endorsed by this Council through Resolution 2231, has been the best available option to ensure that the Iranian nuclear program remains exclusively peaceful. The 2231 format is obviously facing a challenging environment, and the situation in the region is unfolding, as exemplified also by numerous letters submitted to the Security Council President in the last couple of weeks. I firmly believe, however, that through dialogue and multilateralism, we can make the utmost effort in ensuring that the plan and Resolution 2231 are implemented effectively, promoting mutual trust and cooperation. In this regard, we hope for diplomatic efforts to find a way forward. Madam President, finally, I would like to state that as facilitator, I will do my utmost to support the implementation of Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA, which underpins it. My team and myself will continue to work closely with all Council members in an impartial and transparent manner to meet our shared responsibility. I look forward to further strengthening our dialogue and cooperation for the remainder of our mandate. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador Bogar for his briefing. I will now give the floor to those Council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis for your briefings. As we reflect today on the conclusions of the Secretary General's final report on the implementation of Resolution 2231, Iran continues to openly violate its UN obligations. Tehran has sustained its provision of arms to the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon, both in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Moreover, Iran did not comply with relevant 2231 provisions when they were in place, as evidenced by hundreds of drones it transferred to Russia in 2022 for use in attacks against Ukraine. Iran's failure to uphold its non-proliferation obligations has prolonged conflicts and perpetuated instability across the Middle East and beyond for many years. The International Atomic Energy Agency's most recent report on verification and monitoring in Iran, in light of UN Security Council Resolution 2231, demonstrates plainly that Iran continued to accelerate its nuclear activities without any credible civilian justification. On June 12th, the IAEA Board of Governors found Iran in noncompliance for its many failures to uphold obligatory nuclear safeguards. It is regrettable that certain members of this Council have opted to turn a blind eye to, if not encourage, Iranian noncompliance. The United States will not turn a blind eye to Iran's noncompliance and ongoing threat to regional stability. Madam President, President Trump has clearly reiterated that it is time for Iran to make peace. Despite the President's continuous good faith efforts to negotiate and resolve these issues diplomatically, Iran's leaders stonewalled and ultimately refused to agree to a deal that would have prevented them from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. On June 21st, a U.S. precision operation effectively fulfilled our narrow objective to degrade Iran's capacity to produce a nuclear weapon. These strikes, in accordance with the inherent right to self-defense, collective self-defense, consistent with the UN Charter, aimed to mitigate the threat posed by Iran to Israel, the region, and to more broadly international peace and security. Following this historic operation, President Trump immediately coordinated a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Madam President, in this critical moment, we must all urge Iran to seize this opportunity for peace and prosperity and abide by its international obligations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Madam President, thank you. I wish to thank the Undersecretary General DiCarlo for her briefing and also for nice words addressed to me and my team as facilitators of the implementation of the 2231 resolution. And I want to thank also the representative of the European Union for his insights. Madam President, JCPOA is undoubtedly one of the greatest achievements of multilateralism of the past decade. A unified position amongst the key actors was a decisive factor. It brought about a robust regime that comprehensively addressed a pressing international security issue. Regrettably, it suffered its share of tough trials and setbacks in recent years. To our regret, the US withdrew from it, and Iran gradually made several steps away from its JCPOA commitments. Slovenia remains deeply concerned by the continued alarming expansion of Iran's nuclear program. The re-establishment of Iranian constructive engagement with the IAEA is key and will help Iran to regain the international community's confidence about its nuclear activities. We have consistently condemned Iran's unacceptable disregard for its non-proliferation obligations, including the IAEA Safeguard Agreement. Slovenia has zero tolerance for nuclear proliferation. However, Slovenia has also zero tolerance for attacks against nuclear infrastructure anywhere. Madam President, the Iran nuclear file is on a decidedly wrong path, and we urgently need a change of pace. We welcome the announcement of a ceasefire, which is an important step towards restoring stability in the region. We join the calls to both parties to respect it. Madam President, this is potentially the last regular Council meeting about the implementation of JCPOA and Resolution 2231. It seems like an era is coming to a close, and it is uncertain what the ensuing era will bring. The latest developments in the region add the unpredictability and raise questions about the future of not only Iran, but the whole region and the nuclear non-proliferation architecture. One thing is certain, though. As October and the Termination Day are approaching, it is important to recall that JCPOA's objectives remain valid. We need diplomacy, and we need it now. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for a valuable briefing. And I also thank the European Union Head of Delegation to the United Nations, His Excellency Stavros Lambridinis, and Ambassador Samuel Zboga, the United Nations Security Council facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231, for their important remarks and valuable contributions. We welcome the Secretary General's report, which reaffirms that diplomacy remains the best and indeed the only viable path for addressing concerns relating to Iran's nuclear program and regional security. We are deeply concerned by a report of Iran's decision to enrich uranium beyond research-grade thresholds in contravention of its obligations under Article 3 of the NPT. Such enrichment risks eroding confidence in the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear activities and raises legitimate questions regarding compliance with its safeguards commitment. These concerns, we insist, must be addressed within the NPT framework and in full compliance with international law, including the Charter of the United Nations. We call on Iran to restore full transparency by reinstalling all IAEA monitoring equipment, concluding the additional protocol without delay, continuing cooperation with the IAEA, and granting the agency unhindered access to all nuclear facilities. Security Council Resolution 2231 remains the principal non-proliferation framework for Iran. Its provisions regarding nuclear-related transfers, verification measures, and the procurement channel will sunset on 18th October 2025. A failure to achieve measurable progress by that date would weaken the Council's authority, undermine the global non-proliferation architecture, and erode confidence in the NPT 3 pillars: non-proliferation, disarmament, and the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Sierra Leone reaffirms its unwavering support for the IAEA's verification mandate and underscore the imperative of protecting safeguarded nuclear facilities. Safeguarded nuclear installations serve exclusively peaceful purposes and must remain inviolable. International humanitarian law obliges all parties to refrain from attacks on such facilities, the destruction of which could release hazardous materials with devastating consequences for civilians and the environment. Should further strikes occur on safeguarded nuclear facilities, this Council must be prepared to act decisively in the discharge of its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security. Madam President, Sierra Leone commends the JCPOA coordinators' continued effort to engage all participants, including the United States, in pursuit of full implementation of the plan. We welcome the 4 new notifications under Annex B of Resolution 2231, which reflect ongoing legitimate nuclear cooperation. We call on all states to safeguard the integrity of the procurement channel and to refrain from any actions that might undermine JCPOA commitment or jeopardize the diplomatic momentum vital to non-proliferation efforts. To advance Resolution 2231, strengthen the NPT, and avert further escalation, Sierra Leone proposes the following 5 points as a roadmap. First, with respect to the ongoing conflict, and which I shall return to shortly, we urge the urgent need for a comprehensive ceasefire, an immediate cessation of all reciprocal strikes, and sustained measures to de-escalate tensions and return to dialogue. We welcome the announcement of a ceasefire reportedly reached between Israel and Iran, as announced by President Donald Trump of the United States, and we urge the parties to demonstrate good faith and fully comply with this agreement. Second, full and unrestricted IAEA verification consistent with NPT safeguards, including the prompt reactivation of all monitoring equipment and comprehensive application of all additional protocol. Third, the revival of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action through sustained coordinated diplomacy involving the E3, Iran, the United States, and regional partners. Fourth, continued operation of the procurement channel and calibrated sanctions relief linked to verifiable compliance as a means of building confidence in legitimate peaceful nuclear trade. Fifth and finally, the exploration of additional confidence-building measures, including IAEA-supervised fuel swaps and intensified regional dialogue aimed at establishing a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. Madam President, turning briefly to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran with the involvement of the United States, Sierra Leone recalls a statement of 20 and 22nd June 2025 in which we caution that recent military escalation has gravely undermined diplomatic efforts essential to diffusing this crisis. We are equally concerned by Iran's missile strikes on 23rd June against a United States military base in Qatar. While Qatar's air defenses successfully intercepted the missiles as reported and prevented casualties, these attacks triggered regional airspace closures and heightened instability. Such actions could imperil diplomatic channels and risk drawing additional actors into a broader regional conflict. We continue to reiterate the centrality of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter and stress that no reliance on Article 51 can justify violations of this fundamental prohibition on the use of force. On this International Day of Women in Diplomacy, we join in echoing the Secretary General's call to, and I quote, give peace a chance, end of quote, through an immediate ceasefire, de-escalation, sustained diplomacy, and the urgent resumption of negotiations. In closing, Madam President, Sierra Leone underscores the imperative of upholding the UN Charter in good faith, particularly Articles 2, 25, and 103, which enshrine the primacy of peaceful dispute resolution and the binding nature of Council's decision. In this regard, with the sunset of Resolution 2231 looming on 18 October 2025, the clock is ticking. Member States must now rise to the challenge and demonstrate the statecraft demanded by their Charter's obligation. This moment must be seized to reinforce the global non-proliferation regime, advance disarmament, facilitate peaceful nuclear cooperation, and reaffirm our collective commitment under the NPT. The alternative is simply unthinkable. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, we would like to thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo and Ambassador Zogbar and Lambridis for their briefings. We appreciate their continuing efforts to support the implementation of Resolution 2231 of 2015 and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. We take note of the Secretary General's 19th report on the implementation of Resolution 2231 of 2015 and the Joint Commission's report on the status of the Procurement Working Group decisions. Madam President, Resolution 2231 and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action represent significant achievements of multilateral diplomacy, and we continue to view them as vital pillars for regional and international peace and security. We note with concern the findings of the Secretary General's 19th report and the Facilitator's 6-month report, which highlight the ongoing challenges facing the full implementation of the JCPOA. This briefing takes place in a deeply dangerous context, where recent developments have shifted focus away from diplomatic efforts to address the Iranian nuclear program. The evolving geopolitical landscape in the Middle East underscores the critical importance of Resolution 2231 in preventing further escalation and weapons of mass destruction proliferation in the region. Madam President, Somalia welcomes the recent ceasefire between Israel and Iran and urge all parties to fully respect and abide by it. This development is a positive step towards reducing tensions in the region and demonstrates the potential for diplomacy even in challenging circumstances. Our delegation encourages all stakeholders to exercise maximum restraint and to avoid actions that could further escalate tensions. We are particularly concerned by the humanitarian consequences of recent escalations, which have resulted in the loss of civilian lives and damage to critical infrastructure. Our delegation echoes the Secretary General's call for immediate de-escalation and urge all parties to prioritize diplomacy and dialogue over confrontation. Somalia acknowledges the divergent perspectives among Council members and the JCPOA participants regarding the causes of the current impasse. We believe that mutual respect, patience, and a genuine commitment to dialogue are essential to overcoming these differences. The international community must remain united in its support for the peaceful resolution of disputes and the preservation of the non-proliferation regime. As the expiration date of Resolution 2231 approaches, we encourage all member states to continue engaging constructively and transparently in support of the JCPOA. Madam President, Somalia believes that a balanced approach which addresses the concerns of all parties is essential to resolving the current situation. To conclude, Somalia reiterates its unswerving support for the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. We call upon all parties to redouble their diplomatic efforts to address outstanding issues in good faith and to work collectively towards a peaceful and a sustainable solution that enhances security for the region and the world. Thank you. I thank you, Madam.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I extend my gratitude to USG Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Lambrinidis for their briefings. I also appreciate the permanent representative of Slovenia for his role as the new facilitator. At the outset, the Republic of Korea truly welcomes the announced ceasefire between Iran and Israel. We commend the parties concerned for exercising restraint and choosing the path of de-escalation at a perilous moment when conflicts could have further escalated. As the Secretary General has rightly pointed out in this chamber, the core issue underlying this conflict is the nuclear question. And a significant trust gap has long existed with respect to Iran's nuclear program. Our shared concerns on Iran's nuclear program and outstanding NPT safeguards issues remain unaddressed. The latest IAEA reports have indicated Iran's continuous and rapid expansion of its uranium enrichment activities. And the IAEA Director General's comprehensive assessment has concluded that the agency is not in a position to verify that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Consequently, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted a resolution on Iran's outstanding safeguard issues. Madam President, as a result of this persistent trust gap, which Iran has long dismissed and failed to properly address, we have witnessed a military conflict unfold over the past 12 days, which has been a source of grave concern for us. We now find ourselves entering a new phase. Nevertheless, we note that even after the ceasefire, the limited availability of relevant information is causing considerable uncertainty. This uncertainty makes it challenging to accurately assess the situation on the ground and to consider the appropriate path forward. And precisely because of such uncertainties, our objective as embodied in Resolution 2231 remains unchanged. We have consistently worked to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear activities. To this end, it is critical that the IAEA's monitoring and verification activities continue without hindrance. As a first step, we therefore expect Iran to fully guarantee the IAEA's unhindered access in the aftermath of the ceasefire. This will also enable the agency to promptly resume its monitoring and verification activities in Iran in accordance with its mandate on nuclear safety, security, and safeguards. Madam President, while the Iranian nuclear issue remains unresolved, we note with concern that Security Council Resolution 2231 is set to expire this October. Without further action, the Council's direct mandate on the Iranian nuclear file will lapse. In this regard, we strongly urge Iran to ensure full and transparent cooperation with the IAEA. The Republic of Korea fully supports the agency's pivotal role in this important process. Based on the IAEA's reliable information, we trust that the Council will be able to make an informed and responsible decision. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I would like to thank the USG for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, the delegate of the EU, Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, and our colleague, the permanent representative of Slovenia, as facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. I thank them for their briefings. They've reminded us of the seriousness of the events we've just lived through and the seriousness of the way in which Iran has been managing its nuclear program for many years. Firstly, Madam, France welcomes the announcement by the United States of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Since the 13th of June, we followed with concern the strikes, the exchanges between Iran and Israel, and then the U.S. strikes against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. There is a major risk for escalation, which could have serious consequences for regional stability. The ceasefire must now lead to a complete cessation of hostilities, which we call on all parties to respect. It is in the interest of everyone to avoid a new cycle of violence. The ceasefire must allow for the resumption of negotiations on the Iranian nuclear issue and on all of the security challenges posed by Iran. And that is why we call the Minister of Foreign Affairs with the British, EU, and UK counterparts has contacted the Iranian foreign minister in Geneva last Friday. Our position is clear. The nuclear Iranian position can only be, or issue can only be resolved through diplomatic means, given the risk of proliferation and threats to international peace and security. It is essential for this Security Council to remain seized of this matter. Madam President, while we are meeting to consider the implementation of Resolution 2231 a few months prior to its expiration, we must recall the development of events which have led to the current situation. Without going back to 2003, the Iranian nuclear issue is the very raison d'etre of the 2015 agreement with the E3+3, as well as Resolution 2231, through which this Council had endorsed this agreement. Since then, the Europeans have continued to implement their commitments under the agreement, including after following the withdrawal of the United States in 2018. Iran has taken the responsibility in 2019 of ceasing to implement its commitments. As you will recall, we used the mechanism for dispute settlements under the agreement. The 3 then carried out diplomatic efforts to achieve the return of the U.S. to the agreement and to bring Iran to respect its commitments. And in point of fact, in 2022, Iran had 2 revised proposals, and we regret the fact that these opportunities were missed. In recent years, Iran, on the contrary, has become engaged in an escalation of its nuclear program. It has almost exceeded the limits under the agreement. By the end of 2025, the uranium stocks in Iran was 40 times above the limit set under the agreement. That includes more than 400 highly enriched kilograms of uranium. The enrichment to this level has no credible civilian use, and the Director General of the IAEA has underscored the fact that Iran was the only non-nuclear weapon state to enrich uranium to that level. According to the IAEA, Iran would have 9 significant amounts, that is 9 times the quantity of material from which a nuclear weapon could be developed. This escalation has led to serious doubts about the nature of the Iranian nuclear program, and the Director General of the IAEA himself has said that he was not in a position to guarantee the peaceful nature, and a resolution adopted on the 12th of June by the Board of Governors acknowledged the violation of that agreement by Iran. Over the years, Iran has at the same time pursued its ballistic missile program, which could be used as a vector for nuclear weapons. Iran has refused any substantial cooperation with the EU, and it has removed the monitoring equipment that was established and removed their accreditation, the accreditation from some of the experts. Because of these obstacles, the agency no longer has continued knowledge of all of the Iranian nuclear programs. Iran has multiplied its disturbing threats to leave the NPT. We would call on Iran to resume full cooperation with the agency, and in particular to allow for access as soon as possible to its nuclear facilities. It is essential for the agency to determine that the uranium stocks have not been moved, and we express our support for the Director General of the IAEA and for the teams carrying out their activities with professionalism and impartiality. Access by Iran to nuclear weapons would threaten international and regional peace and security. It endangers the integrity of the non-proliferation regime. Namely, the Iranian issue continues to deserve the concern of the Council. On the 18th of October 2025, Resolution 2231 will come to an end. We call on Iran to return to dialogue so that we can find a robust, verifiable, and lasting diplomatical solution responding to all legitimate concerns of the international community on the Iranian nuclear program. France, with the EU and the E3 in close cooperation with the United States, will remain mobilized to that end, and we are determined to conclude an agreement which will take account of the non-proliferation regime, regional stability, and European security interests. France and its EU partners will remain mobilized under Resolution 2231, the snapback provision, if such an agreement were not to be found by the summer. Since 2003, we have sought a diplomatic solution to guarantee in the long term the possibility of Iran not having a nuclear program. That remains our priority. Thank you.
The representative of France for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. We greet and thank the USG for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, the head of delegation of the EU to the United Nations, Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, and the facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231 at the Security Council, Ambassador Samuel Osbogar. We've heard with interest and hope the announced intentions for a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. We believe that this possibility will be a valuable opportunity for reducing tensions and for creating room for dialogue and peace. We hope that this ceasefire will be the first step towards broader negotiations, which will lead to progress and lasting solutions and contribute to stability for the entire region. Panama takes note of the report introduced by the facilitator on the implementation of Resolution 2231, and we are grateful for his efforts in preparing the report. At the same time, we have carefully read the 19th report of the Secretary General, and we share his concern at the critical regional situation which currently surrounds the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. We acknowledge the value of multilateral nuclear agreements and see them as essential pillars for international peace and security. The JCPOA was undoubtedly one of the greatest achievements of multilateralism in the field of nonproliferation. To take up this mechanism and to give it yet another chance is to reaffirm our commitment to diplomacy. We remained concerned at the fact that the provisions of Resolution 2231 will expire on the 18th of October of 2025, and despite that deadline, the goals both of the resolution and the plan have not yet been fully met. At the same time, we are concerned that IAEA verification and monitoring related to the JCPOA have been seriously impacted by Iran's non-compliance, as reported in the most recent report of the Director General of the IAEA. In this context, we reiterate that our position based on the fundamental principles of Panama's foreign policy, is to give priority to strengthening the global non-proliferation regime, to ensure respect for that multilateral architecture, and to promote dialogue and diplomacy as a means for reducing tensions and strategic risks. However, we cannot ignore the most recent events, which have merely worsened the already fragile trust and has led to serious concerns about the Iranian nuclear program, as well as the issue of compliance with internationally agreed commitments. The IAEA has warned in its resolutions that attacks on nuclear facilities represent a significant risk because it could lead to the release of radioactive material. At this critical juncture, we appeal to Iran to allow the monitoring and verification of its facilities by the personnel of the IAEA. It is also essential to understand the magnitude and the scale of damage caused by the most recent attacks. We agree with the views expressed by the Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, and I quote, "Establishing the facts on the ground is a prerequisite for any agreement, and that can only be achieved through IAEA inspections," close quotes. At the same time, we urge Iran to comply fully with its commitments under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, as well as the Safeguards Agreement and the provisions of Resolution 2231 by this Council, particularly given the possibility that enriched uranium has been moved without due IAEA supervision. We cannot allow a weakening in the non-proliferation architecture. That architecture has provided greatest guarantees for international stability and security and significantly reduced the risk of nuclear weapons becoming a source of confrontation or conflict. In this context, it is urgent for the parties to resume negotiations and to make full use of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Resolution 2231 of this Security Council, as well as of bilateral mechanisms established to make progress towards regional and global stability and security. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Madam President, I thank USG Di Carlo and Ambassadors Zbogar and Lambrinidis for their comprehensive briefings. The Council convenes today on the implementation of Resolution 2231 of 2015, which endorsed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on Iran's nuclear program. And this is our last briefing on the implementation of this resolution, which expires on October this year. Needless to stress that this meeting comes at a critical juncture. We meet with cautious optimism, but real relief following the announcement of ceasefire between Iran and Israel, brokered by the United States and Qatar. We welcome this important diplomatic achievement, which puts an end to 12 days of dangerous escalation and provides much-needed space for the escalation, dialogue, and diplomacy. This latest episode has starkly demonstrated the fragility of our collective security and the serious risks associated with the targeting of nuclear facilities particularly those under IAEA safeguards. The events of the past days have only reinforced the urgent need to uphold the principles of the nuclear non-proliferation regime and to refrain from any actions that could further undermine its integrity. Madam President, while this ceasefire represents really a positive development, it also serves as a reminder of the critical importance of respecting international legal norms, including those enshrined in the IAEA safeguard system. These safeguards are central to ensuring that nuclear energy is used exclusively for peaceful purposes. In this regard, we reiterate the importance of the full and balanced implementation of the JCPOA by all parties. Should I add, including its provisions related to the lifting of sanctions. It remains a key component and offers a practical framework for addressing concerns related to Iran's nuclear program through dialogue, transparency, and verification. As the Secretary General of the United Nations stated in his report, diplomacy remains the best and only way to address concerns regarding Iran's nuclear program and regional security issues. About the regional security issues, may I underscore the urgency of establishing a zone free of nuclear weapons and all other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. Such a zone would represent a major step forward for regional and international peace and security. In this context, we recall Security Council Resolution 487, which called on Israel to place its nuclear installation under IAEA safeguards. More than 4 decades later, this call remained ignored, unanswered, unfulfilled. Madam President, to conclude, the announced ceasefire provides a valuable opportunity to reinforce the norms that underpin the global non-proliferation regime. Without selectivity, without double standard, Algeria stands ready to work with all partners to uphold international law and to strengthen the integrity of the global non-proliferation regime, a cornerstone of our shared security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we thank Mr. Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2031, the Permanent Representative of Slovenia, Samuel Boger, And we also congratulate our Slovenian colleagues on the unanimous adoption of the 6-month report of the facilitator and count on their continued efforts to support the activities under the 2231 format until its scheduled conclusion in October 2025. We've listened to the head of delegation of the EU, Stavros Lambrinidis. Madam President, in the night of June 12th to 13th, member states of the parties to the NPT carried out unprovoked aggression, bringing the world to the brink of nuclear disaster. The Russian Federation strongly condemns the attacks on Iran, including its peaceful nuclear infrastructure, which is subject to IAEA safeguards. The actions of the U.S. and Israel directly violated the UN Charter, Security Council resolutions, including 487 and 2231, which we are discussing today, as well as the Charter of the IAEA and relevant resolutions of the IAEA General Conference. They constitute a direct and very dangerous challenge to the authority of the NPT, especially Iran's right guaranteed under Article 4 of the treaty to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, including uranium enrichment. And this was a major blow to the nonproliferation regime. And all of these actions were carried out by two states, one of which is a depositary of the NPT, while the other, for decades, has refused to accede to this crucial element of international security and has refused to subject its nuclear activities to IAEA safeguards. By the way, we are a bit surprised at Israel's request to take part in our meeting, which is taking place under the agenda item non-proliferation. We would like to believe that this decision hints at a potential accession of this country to the NPT, which the entire world would love to see. Colleagues, attacking Iranian infrastructure, including enterprises involved in the nuclear fuel cycle, creates a real threat of radiological consequences, which could affect not only Iranians but the entire Middle East. All of this, unfortunately, again, happened not just with the tacit consent, but with the approval of the UK, France, and Germany, which continue to consider themselves full-fledged parties to the JCPOA. Their assurances of their commitment to a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear program inspired little confidence before, but currently they're absolutely impossible to take seriously. Judge for yourselves that first these countries deliberately refuse to uphold their obligations under the nuclear deal by not providing the necessary conditions for ensuring economic benefits from the lifting of European sanctions against Iran, which were in effect till 2015. And then they followed in the footsteps of the U.S., which withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018, and renewed their unilateral sanctions pressure on Tehran, thus precluding any prospect of a full restoration of the JCPOA, toward which our Iranian colleagues have repeatedly expressed their openness. At the same time, Berlin, London, and Paris attempted to portray Iran's legitimate retaliatory measures, which they themselves, Berlin, London, and Paris, provoked, as unleashing some imaginary Iranian nuclear threat. They repeatedly attempted to undermine the cooperation between Iran and the IAEA Secretariat, which included efforts to settle unresolved questions. And even in spite of that, Iran remained and remains the most rigorously verified state out of all the members of the IAEA. And the Director General of the IAEA's reports clearly indicate the lack of any proliferation risk. Here I emphasize that the IAEA's reports in nowhere mention the conversion of Iran's nuclear material for military purposes or for any undeclared purposes. So the IAEA has observed no signs that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon. Therefore, all of the assertions of our Western colleagues to the contrary are falsehoods calculated for an audience that has not read these reports or that do not understand this issue. The cynicism and hypocrisy of our Western colleagues reached a peak on June 12th. On that day, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted yet another puffed-up resolution on Iran, divorced from reality and inspired by Western countries. Immediately afterward, Israel carried out strikes against Iran's peaceful nuclear sites. A week later, the sovereign territory of Iran was attacked by the U.S., and this demonstrates that this 1-2 punch was agreed upon ahead of time. The UK and France, which claimed to be champions of diplomacy, rushed to defend the aggression of West Jerusalem and Washington. As a result, last Sunday, we witnessed another attempt to legitimize the use of force in contravention of the UN Charter and strikes on peaceful nuclear facilities in violation of the IAEA Charter and all norms of nuclear safety and security. And German Chancellor Friedrich Merz even made so bold as to cynically remark, as he already mentioned, that Israel is doing the Europeans' dirty work. And these are the actual words of a head of government of a state party to the JCPOA. We must not forget that West Jerusalem began its operation 2 days before a scheduled round of Iran-U.S. talks on the nuclear issue, mediated by Oman, with the clear intention of sabotaging this process. Against this backdrop, the Western trio even had the audacity to call not for Israel and the U.S., but for Tehran, the victim of aggression, to return to the negotiating table. If our British, French, and German colleagues continue to threaten launching this Resolution 2231, that is a mechanism of sanctions by the Security Council on Iran, I'd like to remind them that there's no political, legal, or procedural basis for this. Berlin, London, and Paris have chronically violated this resolution and the JCPOA, and therefore do not have the right to engage this mechanism. And the U.S. no longer has any basis to do so since it withdrew from the agreement. The Vienna mechanism for dispute settlement still has not been engaged. The U.S., the U.K., France, and Germany do not have the moral right to mention this. It is their actions that truly have betrayed diplomacy and have led to the current situation. Madam President, special responsibility in this regard lies with the IAEA and Secretariat, given the infringement by Israel and the U.S. on the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, which forms the basis for the NPT. The Directorate General and his colleagues are obligated to uphold their mandate, as well as resolutions of the General Conference 444 and 533. The IAEA leadership must not content itself with evasive language and fragmented information, but rather provide detailed reports on the attacks against Iranian nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards. At the same time, it's extremely important to call things by their names and directly indicate who exactly carried out targeted attacks in violation of the charters of the UN and IAEA and resolutions of the Security Council and General Conference of the IAEA. Unfortunately, we've already seen that the Director General of the IAEA includes sometimes subjective judgments alongside facts and statistics in his reports, and these are then used by a certain number of countries to justify their unprovoked aggression. Madam President, the Iranian nuclear program can only be resolved through diplomacy, through negotiated solutions, which are based on international law and the principle of equal and indivisible security. The Russian Federation consistently has supported a peaceful solution to the concerns surrounding the Iranian nuclear program, which is acceptable to all parties as well as the international community as a whole. Here, the greatest responsibility lies on the UN Security Council, which is obligated to take the requisite measures. This is the goal of the draft resolution proposed by Russia together with our Chinese and Pakistani partners. Today, we are proposing to our Council colleagues an updated text that takes into account the latest developments and aims to bring about a lasting ceasefire, as well as oversight of that ceasefire by the Security Council through Secretary General reporting. The JCPOA and Resolution 2231, adopted in 2015, demonstrated that the international community at that time rejected the military approach and clearly chose diplomacy instead. Today, we must make this same choice again without delay. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank Under-Secretary General Mr. Karlo, the head of the EU delegation, Mr. Lambrinidis, for the informative and timely briefing. I would also like to commend my Slovenian colleague Ambassador Spoger and his team for their efforts in timely compiling the facilitator's report. Madam President, first of all, I would like to welcome President Trump's announcement of a ceasefire agreement, also commending the mediating efforts by the U.S. and Qatar. It is a necessary first step towards sustainable security, which can only be achieved through diplomacy and a negotiated deal that would address all proliferation risks and guarantee the security of all countries of the region. Madam President, on today's issue of non-proliferation, allow me to highlight the following 3 points. First and foremost, Greece reiterates its unwavering commitment to preserving and strengthening the global nuclear non-proliferation regime. The IAEA and NPT remains indispensable institutional cornerstones. We therefore urge all state parties to comply with the full range of the obligation under the NPT. Secondly, we express serious concern of the findings of the DG Gross's most recent report of May 31st, as well as the IAEA board resolution adopted on June 12th. According to them, the agency's ability to verify Iran's implementation of its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA has been seriously affected. The cessation of Iran's application of the additional protocol, the removal of JCPOA-related monitoring and surveillance equipment, the non-compliance with its obligation under the Safeguards Agreement, and the access refusal to experienced IAEA inspectors have collectively led to a loss of continuity of knowledge, a gap that the agency now confirms cannot be restored. Of equal concern is a steady increase in Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium. As of May 17, and since late February, Iran's total enriched uranium stockpile has been considerably increased and reached up to 60%. This is deeply alarming for a non-proliferation perspective, as there is no credible civilian use for uranium enriched to this level. We remain deeply concerned with the Director General's inability to provide assurances that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Thirdly, Greece continues to view the JCPOA, as endorsed by this Council through Resolution 2231, as the best available framework to ensure that Iran's nuclear program remains exclusively peaceful. Its full and effective implementation would provide both transparency and confidence, not only with regard to verification, but also with a view towards sanctions relief, economic developments, and regional de-escalation. It is in this spirit that we fully support all diplomatic efforts to secure Tehran's full compliance with its obligations under the JCPOA. We welcome last Friday E3 Iran talks, while we call for the resumption of the US-Iran talks. As a country with historical ties and geographical proximity to the region, Greece stands ready to support all constructive efforts aimed at de-escalation, diplomacy, and dialogue. Madam President, in closing, let me stress that Iran, as a matter of fact no other nation, must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. The international community cannot afford a major nuclear proliferation crisis. With the credibility of the global non-proliferation regime at stake, and with military escalation threatening the security and stability of the Middle East, the time has come for responsible action. We call on all parties to demonstrate political will, engage meaningfully and in good faith, and reaffirm the commitment to dialogue and diplomacy. As the events of the last day demonstrate, we are glad that even in these very difficult circumstances, the window of diplomacy has remained open, and there is now an opportunity for addressing through dialogue all concerns about the Iranian nuclear program. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam President. And as others, I thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo, Ambassador Lambrinidis, and Ambassador Spoger for your briefings and updates. Madam President, the situation in the Middle East continues to evolve. We welcome the announced ceasefire between Israel and Iran as a critical step towards de-escalation in a region that has endured far too much instability. We urge both parties to adhere to it and to abide by the obligations under the UN Charter and international law. This moment must be seized, not only to consolidate gains in regional security, but also to create the necessary space for renewed diplomatic engagement on the nuclear file. It is in the interest of all parties to pursue a negotiated solution, which is the only viable path to restore stability and lasting peace in the region. Madam President, even before the recent developments, Denmark has continuously expressed our concern about Iran's nuclear trajectory and its activities in blatant violation of the JCPOA. We have also persistently warned against an Iranian withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Our position is clear. Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. This follows Iran's obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and its commitments under the JCPOA. It is therefore deeply alarming that the recent IAEA report shows that Iran has failed to declare nuclear material in its possession and demonstrate that Iran has impeded and obstructed agency verification activities, as also conveyed by the 2231 facilitator letter. We reiterate our great concern that the IAEA is unable to assure that the Iranian nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. These concerns are furthered by Iran's production and stockpiling of vast amounts of enriched uranium with no plausible civilian purpose. It still remains unclear whether Iran has ceased its enriching activities. We do not take it lightly and call on Iran to change its course of action and abide by its obligation. This remains true, even if recent events have changed the circumstances surrounding the Iranian nuclear issue. Madam President, as many has highlighted here today, this is the last mandated meeting before the expiration of the JCPOA, meaning there is no time to spare. Iran must, therefore, engage seriously in negotiations with the international community, leading to an agreement which addresses all concerns related to its nuclear program. Securing an agreement on the nuclear issue has the potential to foster lasting stability in the Middle East. All efforts must be deployed to this end. The role of the IAEA's verification and monitoring of Iran's nuclear program remains imperative, also in the current situation. Denmark strongly supports the agency's professional and impartial efforts in carrying out its mandate to verify the implementation of Iran's safeguard obligations, especially during these complex circumstances where the safety and security of the inspectors must also be kept in mind. Madam President, in closing, we continue to call for a diplomatic solution. Only a negotiated solution can bring a lasting settlement to concerns about Iran's nuclear program. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis for their briefings. I would also like to thank Ambassador Samuel Sboger for presenting the report in his capacity as the facilitator of the 2231 format. Madam President, the core common element of these three briefings that we just heard in this meeting was the primacy of a peaceful diplomatic solution. We are meeting at a crucial point in the implementation of Resolution 2231 and Security Council's consideration of Iran's nuclear issue. Obviously, the developments of the past 2 weeks have impacted the context of the whole issue and have a bearing on our discussions today. However, what has not changed are the fundamental principles and multilateral spirit behind the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and the Resolution 2231 adopted 10 years ago. The JCPOA was a unique instrument, manifestation of an approach based on dialogue, diplomacy, and pragmatism. It was the outcome of painstaking and arduous, yet constructive negotiations. It charted a roadmap to comprehensively address the concerns of the parties concerned by clearly defining their relevant obligations and responsibilities. While proceeding very well, the agreement was regrettably disrupted, leaving many complications in its wake that impacted the full and faithful implementation of the JCPOA by various parties. Notwithstanding those challenges, the most widely held view was that dialogue, diplomacy, and constructive engagement was the only viable way forward. That view was still there and was indeed back in play with the negotiations between Iran and the United States facilitated by Oman, till it was violently disrupted by the unlawful and illegal military attacks on the IAEA safeguarded Iranian nuclear facilities. These military strikes also impeded the IAEA's crucial verification functions in Iran. Pakistan has expressed its clear position on these developments in this chamber and elsewhere over the past 2 weeks. Our leadership has also remained actively engaged with counterparts from many other countries during this period. Madam President, what we have witnessed should never have happened. Even now, it is our firm belief that these actions should not be allowed to further complicate the peaceful resolution of long-standing issues, as well as the full and effective implementation of Resolution 2231. We reaffirm our support for the resolution of the Iranian nuclear issue through peaceful means, diplomatic engagement, and sustained dialogue. Pakistan advocates the preservation and renewal of the JCPOA or its substitution by an equally sound agreement that is acceptable to all sides before it expires in October this year. The IAEA is the institution responsible for verifying compliance with the respective nuclear safeguards obligations of member states. It is mandated to do so in an objective, impartial, and credible manner, purely on technical grounds. The IAEA must be enabled to fulfill this statutory function. We believe that verification activities by the IAEA should continue unimpeded. The IAEA must continue its work in an impartial and apolitical manner to provide objective reporting and credible information regarding the issues under its purview. Madam President, with regards to recent developments in the region, I would like to emphasize the following points. First, condemnation of violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states, and the threat or use of force to settle disputes. Second, clear rejection of attacks on IAEA safeguarded nuclear facilities, which violate Security Council and IAEA resolutions as well as international humanitarian law. Third, we request the Secretary General to report on the implications of these developments on the implementation of Resolution 2231, particularly those arising from military strikes against nuclear facilities. And we also request the Director General IAEA to share his assessment from legal, technical, safety, security, and safeguards points of view. Fourth, we urge sustained cessation of hostilities and a permanent ceasefire to allow resumption of dialogue and verification activities by the IAEA. Fifth, there is an urgent need to renew diplomatic engagement to seriously and faithfully address the outstanding issues in a cooperative manner as per the rights, obligations, and responsibilities of the parties concerned. Madam President, we welcome the announcement of the ceasefire understanding between Iran and Israel, and we expect this to be fully respected. We commend all those who played a pivotal role in facilitating this development and hope this positive step will contribute to lasting peace and stability in the region. This is a vital step that must now be followed up by constructive and comprehensive engagement. Pakistan firmly believes that all disputes must be resolved in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter and international law, including respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. We call on all parties to fulfill their respective obligations and responsibilities and avoid any further escalation. Most importantly, the trust and confidence in the diplomatic engagement that was damaged by the unprovoked aggression must be meticulously restored. The Council should allow sufficient time to continuing efforts between the IAEA and Iran, as well as other parties, to resolve outstanding issues. Recent developments have yet again manifested the grave dangers that present themselves when there are violations of the UN Charter and international law. The cost of seeking to resolve issues through military means is more than evident. The region, and indeed the whole world, cannot be held hostage to such adventures, dangerous precedents, and spiraling escalations. Diplomatic engagement and the resumption of dialogue are the best means to resolve all outstanding issues. Diplomacy has delivered previously, and with the necessary political will, it can certainly deliver again. Lastly, allow me to inform the Council that following up on the draft resolution circulated by China, Pakistan, and Russia on Sunday, we have updated and revised the text to reflect the latest developments, including the ceasefire, and have circulated it to Council members. Securing the ceasefire was one of the primary objectives of the draft resolution, in addition to calling for a negotiated settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue and promoting respect for international law under all circumstances. We will engage constructively with fellow members on the text of this draft resolution with a view to arriving at a consensus outcome, signifying the Council's support for sustained ceasefire and sustained dialogue and diplomatic engagement for a lasting solution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I thank Under-Secretary General De Carlo, Ambassador Lambrinidis, and Ambassador Zboga for your briefings. Let me start by welcoming the announcement by President Trump of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But the situation remains extremely fragile. We call on all sides to respect the ceasefire in full. Our priority remains stability in the Middle East, and we are clear that restarting this conflict is in no one's interest. Now is the time for a return to diplomacy. We, along with our partners, are clear that only diplomacy can achieve a durable solution to the Iranian nuclear threat. We urge Iran to take this opportunity to engage in negotiations now. It is critical that Iran does not miss this window for diplomacy. President, as we know, Iran's nuclear program has been far beyond any credible civilian justification, including an enriched uranium stockpile 40 times the limit set by the JCPOA. It is urgent that the IAEA have full access, especially on Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. We have been clear that Iran cannot develop or acquire a nuclear weapon. The UK, alongside our E3 partners, stands ready to support efforts towards a negotiated solution. We will use all diplomatic levers at our disposal to support a negotiated outcome and ensure Iran does not develop a nuclear weapon. President, finally, we commend the IAEA and the Director General for their vital work, including under the mandate of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. They have displayed professionalism and impartiality, and they have our full support. We urge Iran to cooperate with the IAEA in the interests of both safety and diplomacy. Colleagues, we urge all parties to urgently pursue a deal that establishes international confidence long-term that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. This ceasefire is the first step towards that. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of China.
主席，我感谢迪卡洛副秘书长、欧盟驻联合国代表团兰布里尼蒂斯大使及斯洛文尼亚常驻代表日博加尔大使所做的通报。以色列和美国以未来可能的威胁为由，对伊朗动武，严重违反国际法，侵犯伊朗主权，袭击国际原子能机构保障监督下的伊朗核设施，更是开创了恶劣的先例，严重威胁国际核不扩散体系。中方再次明确表示谴责。上述行径还破坏了解决伊核问题的外交努力，给安理会第2231号决议执行带来高度的不确定性。中方对此严重关切，深感担忧。主席，中方注意到部分安理会成员一味指责伊朗违反防扩散义务，试图为以色列和美国的军事行动开脱。中方希望这些国家正视以下基本事实：美国才是伊朗核危机的始作俑者，是美国在2018年单方面退出伊核全面协议，恢复并不断升级对伊单边制裁，采取极限施压措施，致使伊方无法享有协议赋予的经济红利，被迫减少履行协议义务。又是美国置自身信誉于不顾，悍然对伊核设施发动军事打击，破坏由其自身发起的谈判进程，再度导致伊核问题走入困局，地区局势骤然升级。伊朗解决伊核问题的诚意应该得到重视。时至今日，伊朗仍在履行核不扩散义务，执行全面保障监督协定。伊朗一再强调不寻求发展核武器，以建设性姿态与美方开展多轮的专业务实谈判，从未放弃外交努力。然而，一些国家片面援引国际原子能机构总干事报告内容，无视伊朗与机构合作的积极面，在没有充分协商情况下强行推动机构理事会通过决议，损害对话氛围，激化矛盾和对抗。有关国家应深刻反思这一不负责任的举措所产生的恶劣影响。主席，中方认为，解决伊核问题的外交手段尚未穷尽，和平解决仍有希望。各方应汲取教训，在平等基础上重启对话，推动伊朗核问题重返政治解决轨道。我强调3点：第一，确保停火止战是当务之急。事实证明，武力不是解决国际争端的正确方式，也解决不了伊核问题。中方注意到当前的局势发展，期待实现真正停火，切实有效落地。有关方面应采取切实措施，防止局势再次升级。国际社会必须为推动局势降温、推动对话谈判做出努力。第二，坚持政治解决是唯一途径。伊核全面协议和安理会第2231号决议确定的核心目标和宗旨，在伊核问题下步政治解决进程中依然有效。要坚持政治外交解决大方向，反对诉诸武力和非法制裁。要统筹核不扩散与和平利用核能的目标，伊朗应继续恪守不发展核武器的承诺， 各方应充分尊重伊朗作为不扩散核武器条约缔约国享有的和平利用核能的权利。各方应坚持通过平等对话协商解决各自的合理关切。第三，开启对话谈判是根本出路。中方支持一切为重启伊核谈判所做的努力，相信这也是安理会绝大多数成员的立场。安理会应发挥建设性作用，协助有关各方建立信任，弥合分歧，为重启谈判创造有利条件。相关国家应摒弃动辄威胁启动快速恢复制裁机制的做法，否则只会加剧紧张对立，甚至进一步破坏外交努力。伊核问题的妥善解决事关国际防扩散体系的权威性和有效性，对中东地区和平稳定至关重要。当前地区局势处在关键和紧要时刻，中方呼吁各方增强紧迫意识，体现责任担当，尽早